Thank you for joining us for the webinar today about do you need to amend your privacy impact assessment. So today we're going to talk during this live workshop about the goal to plan your privacy impact assessment amendment. So make sure that you have the download PIA amendment checklist. We sent that to you in the emails before today's webinar, so you can make sure that you follow along with that PIA amendment checklist, and that's going to help you take notes today so that by the end of the 60-minute webinar, then you're going to have some key steps about how to plan your privacy impact assessment amendment. So I want to thank Trinus, who is our sponsor today for the webinar. And the webinar is going to be about 60 minutes long. And the fine folks from Trinus are on the line today for the webinar, so that if you've got specific questions about technology, that you can ask your questions in the chat, and they might have an answer for you right away. They might need to follow up with you. But we want to be able to help you with your technology solutions that are going to support your privacy impact assessment and the amendment. So my name is Jean Eaton. I'm your practical privacy coach and practice management mentor with Information Managers. And I'm the host for your course today. So today we're going to talk about privacy impact assessments. And privacy impact assessments are a requirement of legislation first for every healthcare provider in Alberta. Now, a privacy impact assessment is a requirement by legislation, but even more importantly, it really is a good business tool for you to have to make sure that you've got efficient ways to collect, use, disclose, and provide access to personal information. So every business in Alberta should have a privacy impact assessment. If you're a business that's also under the Health Information Act in Alberta, then you have a requirement under legislation to submit that privacy impact assessment to the Commissioner's Office, the Office of the Information and Privacy Commissioner of Alberta. So that's a specific requirement for healthcare legislation and for healthcare practices. So as we go through the webinar today, I encourage you to enter your questions into the chat box, and I will pause during our webinar today so that I can answer your questions. And if you've got a particular technology question, you can ask that of the folks from Trinus as well. So I'm going to ask the folks from Trinus just to enter into the chat today to introduce yourselves so we know who they are. And if each of you can introduce yourselves in the chat as well. Now, if you've got a particular burning question that you want to make sure that I address today's workshop, please enter that in the chat and I will try and get to your questions today. So after our webinar today, please also make sure that you have connected with me on social media, in particular on LinkedIn. That's where I hang out the most, and that's where I share all sorts of additional resources that are available to you all the time. So please make sure to do that. Now, just as a reminder that I'm a certified health information management professional, which means that I've worked as a director of health records in hospitals across Canada. And now I focus my independent practice to help community-based healthcare practices with their efficient and privacy compliant practices in Alberta and throughout Canada. Now, I do want to remind you that I am not a lawyer and I don't play one on a podcast. So make sure that if you require legal advice that you do contact a lawyer to help you with that. Okay, let's move on. So I want to thank our sponsor Trinus today for our workshop, and Trinus is the home of stress-free IT in Alberta, and their specialty is efficient automation through digital transformation. So if you've got a technical question today, you can enter your questions in the chat or connect with Trinus after the webinar today. So the goal for our workshop today is to help you plan your privacy impact assessment. So you're not going to complete a PIA today. That would be overly ambitious and totally unrealistic. But I do want to help you plan what your next steps are for your privacy impact assessment. So I'm going to stay on the line today and answer your questions until you're comfortable with what you know what your next steps are. You've got some resources that we've shared with you, and I want to help you make sure that you have downloaded those PIA amendment checklists. In particular, that's going to help you with our assessment today. So I'm going to mute my camera so that we can focus on the slides. I'm going to continue to answer your questions here in the chat, and of course we'll do our presentation today. All right, so what is a privacy impact assessment? Well, the privacy impact assessment is a process that assists custodians to review the impact that an implementation of a new administrative practice, information system, or change to existing practices or systems relating to the collection, use, and disclosure of individually identifying information, and the impact that it may have on an individual's privacy. A PIA describes information flows in the project, identifies the legal authorities that allows for that flow of information, and assesses the potential impacts and the risks to privacy and identifies mitigation strategies to minimize the risks. So a big definition, and we're going to take that apart today so that you have a better idea about what a privacy impact assessment is and the steps that you need to take. So the process is designed to help you, the healthcare provider or the custodian, using the terminology from the Health Information Act, to evaluate these potential changes to your system before you implement it so that you can take a look at all of the risks and make sure that you've properly managed those risks. Now, often the privacy officer in your organization is the one that completes the privacy impact assessment. However, it's the custodian or the lead healthcare provider or the CEO that is responsible for completing the privacy impact assessment. There are many purposes for a privacy impact assessment, but primarily it is to demonstrate your privacy compliance to legislation and the reasonable safeguards to protect personal information and ensure the collection, use, disclosure, and the sharing, retention, and the storage are done appropriately. And of course, to ensure that individuals have continued access to their personal individual health information. Now, not having a privacy impact assessment in place is a risk for an organization because you are more likely to have holes or gaps in the administration, technical, or physical safeguards in your organization and how you manage that information. So you're more likely to have privacy, confidentiality, and security mistakes or errors and attacks. Not knowing and not taking preventative measures could result in breaches and fines and potential loss of business. If you have an unfortunate circumstance like this, some type of a privacy or security incident, and you don't have a privacy impact assessment completed, then when there is an investigation about that privacy and security incident, you will be found that you have not met your obligations under the Health Information Act because you didn't have a privacy impact assessment in place. So people often ask me, why do I need to have a PIA? Is anybody going to check? Is anybody going to care? Well, the colleges are now starting to check to make sure that their healthcare providers are being compliant with legislation and that you do have a valid privacy impact assessment. If you want to share information, if you want to have access to Netcare or eLabs or access to images from the radiology services so that you can view them in your healthcare practice, they should be asking you if you have a valid and current up-to-date privacy impact assessment. So whenever we want to share information between healthcare providers, we want to make sure that everybody who understands how that information is going to be protected and following the same rules in the sandbox, we should be asking each other if you have a privacy impact assessment. Now, on the other hand, it is a lot like choosing to drive a car without a license. So you could drive a car without a license. You're still able to drive a car without a license. But if you were stopped in a regular stop check, if you had an accident, if there was any type of an incident, the first thing they're going to ask you for is your driver's license. And if you don't have one, then things get bad really quickly. Very similar to a privacy impact assessment. When you have your privacy impact assessment done, you've done all the groundwork and you're going to find all of the immediate benefits to your business when you complete that privacy impact assessment. But as long as there isn't an incident there may not be any repercussions because you don't have a privacy impact assessment. But if you are in a situation where bad things happen, they get really bad really fast. Having these good steps in place about having a privacy impact assessment will help to prevent bad errors in judgment, poor business processes, and those are symptoms, and they result in unhappy patients, poor services, and it's difficult to hire and keep good employees if you're band-aiding solutions together so that to get the job done, instead of taking a comprehensive approach to make sure that you've got a good solution from end to end. So the issues about having a privacy and security incident are pretty scary, and the solution requires having a plan. The privacy impact assessment is your plan to prevent all of these bad things from happening. Now, a PIA is also a really great place to have discussions with your stakeholders. So there's a common cause and there's a structure to have a conversation with your stakeholders. You should have a privacy officer in your organization. They have a very specific role about managing and monitoring the privacy impact assessment. You should have policies and procedures and training for privacy and security awareness. You must have a privacy breach incident response plan, and you want to engage your stakeholders, your vendors, to participate in those policies and procedures. Make sure that everybody understands what those plans are going to be when you have an incident that happens. So a privacy impact assessment is another good reason or an opportunity to contact your computer network vendors, your EMR vendors, your outsourced transcription or billing support vendors, to make sure that you're all on board and have the same plan in place. Now, a privacy impact assessment will actually help you to select good vendors. So if you approach a vendor, an EMR vendor, or an application vendor, and you ask them questions about their business to be able to help you complete the privacy impact assessment, and they don't have good answers, then there might be a better vendor for you to choose from. So a PIA will help you to spot errors and gaps between the way that you do the work in the clinic, so that you can get the best solutions in place. And things change over time. We know that the digital transformation has changed considerably in just the last couple of years, and in fact, even just the last 6 months. So things change, and what may have been a good solution for you 5 years ago no longer fits your needs. So a privacy impact assessment will help you to review all of that information so that you can make decisions that best meet your needs today and in that near future. So the time that you take now in your privacy impact assessment will help you to identify the potential risks and prevent the incidents from happening. And that will definitely save you time, money, reputation, and even jail time in the future. A privacy impact assessment will help you to improve your healthcare business's policies, procedures, vendor management, workflow, and help you to identify the understanding expectations about your group practice, your employees, and the vendors. So a PIA will provide all sorts of additional benefits for you in your practice. Now, when do you need to do a privacy impact assessment? Well, the whole process is, of course, cyclical. So it starts by having good policies and procedures in your organization, and then reviewing it in your organization. So there should be a review process in your organization where the lead custodians, all of the other healthcare providers, your business owners, and your privacy officers review and accept that privacy impact assessment. Now, if you are a member of a regulated health profession that falls under the Health Information Act, you also have a requirement to submit that to the Office of the Information and Privacy Commissioner, the OIPC, for their review and acceptance. Now, the OIPC is not Alberta Health. It is not part of Alberta Health Services. It's not a government department. It is an independent body that is the advocate or the ombudsman for privacy and individual rights in Alberta. So they have an independent review, and that's a good thing for you, because when they review your privacy impact assessment, they will give you feedback, and they'll say, you know, you looked at all those key things that we think are prevalent in the industry today, but there's something new here on the horizon and you haven't addressed it yet, so perhaps you want to take a look at this. So they'll actually give you some feedback about your policies, your procedures, your plans, to help you make sure that you have those reasonable safeguards to protect reasonable risks from privacy and security incidents. Now, every time that you change a process or you have a new information sharing that you want to do for a project, you need to review your privacy impact assessment. Now, sometimes that becomes an amendment, and sometimes it becomes a brand new project-specific privacy impact assessment. I'm going to talk about some scenarios to help you understand the difference between those two things. But just remember that a privacy impact assessment is a process. It's cyclical. You're going to come back and review this on a regular basis, and every time that you're going to make a change to the systems in your practice, whether it's technology or administrative changes, then you should be asking yourself, do I need to do a PIA or a PIA amendment because of this change? Now, a privacy impact assessment is different than a p-ORA document. So you may have heard from Netcare that they require a provincial organizational readiness assessment document. If you want to have access to Netcare, you must complete this p-ORA document. Now, it's very similar to a PIA because it asks the similar types of questions, but the p-ORA document is actually from Alberta Netcare, and it is a series of checklists of questions that asks about your policies, your procedures, who your vendors are, what systems do you have in place, that you're going to submit directly to Netcare. So they get done at the same time often. You do your PIA and you do your p-ORA about the same time, and it's easy to get them confused, but they are separate documents. They have separate purposes. So we're going to talk about a PIA amendment specifically for Alberta Netcare, and that will also include doing a p-ORA document for Netcare. So we'll come back to that in this presentation in just a little bit. So when do you need to do a privacy impact assessment? Well, you need to do a privacy impact assessment prior to implementing changes in your organization. So if you've got a new project, perhaps you have staff that are going to be working remotely from home, perhaps you're going to do telehealth or telemedicine, and you're implementing some new technology to be able to facilitate that, then you should be doing your privacy impact assessment before you implement those changes. The privacy impact assessment will help you to go through the identifying the risks, all those things that could go wrong, and what are you going to do to mitigate those risks or to prevent them from happening. And you want to have that in place before you implement a new solution. Before you select a vendor, you pay for that service contract, before you buy new technology, you want to make sure that it's going to meet all of your needs. And doing a privacy impact assessment will help you to do that. Now, if we lived in an ideal world, you would complete your privacy impact assessment, submit it to the Commissioner's office, they would review it, and then give you their acceptance on their PIA before you implemented that project. Quite frankly, the Commissioner's office is way behind their goals. They'd like to be able to do the reviews within 3 months, and now it's taking upwards of 12 months. So you're going to do your PIA documentation, submit it to the Commissioner's office, and then you may be able to implement your project before the Commissioner's office has the opportunity to review. That's not the ideal solution, but that is our reality that we're in right now. But do remember that doing a privacy impact assessment or an amendment does take time. Now, generally speaking, an amendment takes less time because you have to do less work than a brand new PIA project. So when is it a new PIA and when is it an amendment? Well, it's also often a bit of a balancing act. And the answer is it depends. So sometimes it's really easy to identify what is a new project. You're starting a new EMR system, you're opening a brand new location, you're starting a new health service program. then those generally are very specific, project-specific PIAs. Most clinics of medical clinic, a chiropractic clinic, a variety of other organizations have 1 or 2 or 3 privacy impact assessments. They've got the organizational policies, privacy impact assessment. If you started with an EMR or practice management software, it includes that. And then perhaps you decided that you're going to have access to Netcare, and perhaps you decided to do telehealth. So that would be 3 separate privacy impact assessments. Once you get that big privacy impact assessment, that organizational management privacy impact assessment, that foundation documents, then the other project-specific documents can leverage that organizational foundational PIA and refer back to it for a lot of the big things that don't change, even if you've just implemented a few of these little projects. Now, a privacy impact amendment happens after you've done your first PIA. So you've got to have an initial PIA done before you can do an amendment. But after that, then there are a lot of variety of scenarios that may apply to make it an amendment and not a brand new PIA. So some common scenarios that would happen that would trigger an amendment, just a little update, would be having a change in custodians. So you've got new healthcare providers that have joined your practice, you've expanded, perhaps somebody's retired or moved to another location. Change in the names of those custodians requires an amendment to the Commissioner's Office for your PIA. And often it becomes just a cover letter. It doesn't have to be a really big deal. You might have a change in privacy officers. You might have added a new location. Well, that becomes a little bit bigger of a cover letter. There might be changes in legislation, and we certainly have seen that. So there are a number of scenarios that we're going to take a quick look at to see if it requires a new PIA or an amendment. So a common scenario is a change in custodians. So it is essentially the same clinic, you've got the same EMR, electronic medical record, you've got the same ownership, you've got the same vendors. Basically, you're doing business the same, but you've changed the custodians. Maybe you've added some additional custodians to your practice. So you're going to send a cover letter to the Commissioner's Office and say, we submitted a PIA in 2018. Here's our acceptance file number, and here's what's changed lately. You've got a change in custodians. And oh, by the way, we've also updated and reviewed our policies and procedures, and specifically that change in legislation that happened in 2018 about privacy breach. We've made sure that we've updated our policies and procedures about that as well. So another scenario is you've got a new location. Perhaps you've got location 1 on the south side, location 2 is on the north side, but essentially everything else is working the same. So you're going to address what's changed. So what often changes is the technology. You're using the same EMR, but now you've got a different way to have remote access so that both locations use the same EMR simultaneously. So you're going to discuss what's changed because of that new location. Maybe you've got some additional custodians and you just address that difference about what has changed. Another common scenario about what's changed is Alberta Netcare Portal. So some chiropractic clinics, for example, that did not previously have access to Netcare now have access to Netcare, and they need to do an expedited privacy impact assessment. Now, an expedited PIA process is something that has been negotiated between Alberta Netcare Portal and the Commissioner's Office. Because of all of those delays about getting access to the Commissioner's Office reviewing the PIAs, they've created a streamlined process. And that streamlined process includes a cover letter that says you've reviewed your policies and procedures, you've made sure it includes all of those requirements to have access to Alberta Netcare Portal, and you agree to also do a privacy organizational readiness assessment, that p-ORA document. Then all of those things in place, you send this cover letter to the Commissioner's Office and said, we've done all of these things. Now remember that when you do that, you also need to attach all of your policies and procedures. So you can't just do the cover letter and say, yeah, we looked at that. you actually have to show them that you have done that. So you need to include your policies and procedures in that as well. So I'm going to share with you a template about doing your cover letter for Alberta Netcare Portal, if that applies for you as well. So another scenario is that you did a privacy impact assessment previously, and it just needs to be updated. So you need to review your privacy impact assessment on a regular basis, review your policies and procedures, and just confirm in a letter to the Commissioner's Office that we looked at everything, nothing significant has changed. We just want to let you know that we've done the right thing and have actually reviewed our policies and procedures and reviewed our PIA, and we're still golden and good to go. That makes an easy PIA amendment to do. Now, if you have a new project, for example, doing telehealth or remote care, there is a new process that the Commissioner's Office has approved during the pandemic to expedite the telehealth PIAs. So the Commissioner's Offices have said you can go ahead and implement new telehealth solutions because of the pandemic, or to be able to properly respond to the pandemic. It does require you to do your policies and procedures, but the Commissioner's Office has agreed that if you send them an email to say, because of the pandemic, because of these circumstances, we're implementing this right away, and then we're going to follow with complete PIA for that specific project as soon as possible, so that we can document that we've looked at the risks. So I want to ask you now to enter into the chat button the number that corresponds to the project that you're working on now. So which PIA amendment are you looking at doing now? Are you doing number 1, new custodians, number 2, new location, number 3, Alberta Netcare Portal or CPAR, number 4, that you're just reviewing your PIA because it's a little out of date and you need to update it, number 5, you're doing telehealth, or number 6, you're looking at some other project. So looking at telehealth and just a general review and an update, that's great. We can help you with that, Susan. Okay, so these are common PIA amendments that I'm seeing day in and day out. So these are the type of PIA amendments that we're going to take a look at here. So in the PIA process, there are 4 clear steps that you need to do, and each of them will be a little longer or a little shorter depending on the size and the scope of your project. The first thing you want to do is to engage the stakeholders, and you want to find out all of those people that are involved in your project. So this is the great time to contact your computer network vendor, your EMR vendor, your outsourced transcription and billing folks, and make sure that you've got the current contact information and get their input on the policies and procedures that are applicable to them. Oftentimes they'll make changes to their organization and either they've forgotten to tell you, or you haven't added to your policies and procedures and made it up to date. So you're going to do all of the documentation in your policies and procedures and your PIA submission. Then you're going to make sure that it gets submitted to your internal reviewers, your custodians, your CEOs, and complete that PIA submission. Then it goes to the Commissioner's Office for their acceptance, and then you get the file number, the H number files. Now, it used to be that the Commissioner's Office would give a file number prefaced with the letter H, and oftentimes vendors will ask you if you've got an H number or an H file number. Now, the Commissioner's Office has changed their numbering system, so they no longer are giving them H numbers. They're just giving you a 6-digit file number. So if a vendor's asking you for the H number, it's the same thing as your PIA file number. And then, of course, you want to review your PIA on a regular basis just to make sure that it's up to date and to amend it as necessary. So take out the download that we gave you, the 10 steps to prepare your PIA amendment, and then you can follow along and ask me questions as we go through this. So the first step in reviewing your PIA is to find your previous documents. So make sure that you have these documents available to you, because you do need to go back and review what you said you were going to do so that you can say what you're doing now and addressing what's changed. So make sure that you've got a copy of the acceptance letter from the Commissioner's Office when they did the first PIA review for you. Oftentimes the Commissioner's Office will say, yes, we've reviewed and accepted your PIA, but next time I want you to think about this, that, and the other thing. So if you're now sending an amendment, the Commissioner's Office expects you to address the questions that they may have asked you a couple of years ago. Make sure that you are reviewing and detailing your computer network vendor summary, the computer network description, your clinic description, because those things are the ones that change over time. And these are concise pieces of your policies and procedures and your PIA submission. So it makes it really easy for you to print off the 4 or 5 pages of your clinic description or your computer network description and share that with the team members internally or with your vendors and say, this is what we wrote 2 years ago when we did our PIA. Is it still current? And it makes it really easy to update that document. Now, here's a bonus tip from me. When you print out that document or you share it in a Microsoft Word document, make sure that you're tracking the changes. I really like having pen and paper, and I still will scribble all over that clinic description. And then I'll share it with other people, because when they see their names in writing on a piece of paper, they're much more inclined to actually pay attention to what the words on that piece of paper say. They're more vested into that, and then you can get that discussion going and that engagement with your front office staff, with your admin team, with your stakeholders and your vendors. Then keep that piece of paper. Keep it all the way through the process. Don't throw it out, because at the end, when you do your cover letter and you're talking about what's changed, then you can go back and take a look at that scribbled up piece of paper and identify the changes really easily. So keep your scratch paper at the beginning, because you're going to find that's very helpful. You're also going to review all of your contracts and agreements, including your information management agreements, reviewing your policies and procedures, and the p-ORA document that you did a couple of years ago. So the first step in the PIA submission is to locate and review all of your previous documents. The second step is to take those documents and share them with your vendors. So if you've got computers in your practices, like most of us do, share that with your computer network vendor, have them review it with you, and see when was the last time you did a security risk assessment. When did you last review the audit logs? When did you last review the backup? Have you restored the backup? If you've changed your backup system and you used to have them on NAS drives and now you've got them on a mirrored image server, or what happened to those old NAS drives? So go back and address what has changed, but also make sure that you haven't left any data behind. Make sure that you've got a complete hardware and a software inventory, and that you have reviewed all of the access permissions. So look at all of the users that are on your list that are still active, and make sure that they are still in your organization. And that applies to your vendors as well. So if you've granted them access to your systems, make sure that those permissions are still active. And anything that is not active, of course, you're going to end date or inactivate them. With your current IT vendor, you're going to have them review the vendor summary, the computer network description, and the agreements, and review together the information manager agreement and make sure that the right people have signed it. So your information manager agreement must be signed by the custodian, the healthcare clinical lead. It is not valid if it's signed by the clinic manager or the business owner. It must be signed by that person who must oblige or must follow the Health Information Act. If it's not signed by the physician, the chiropractor, the lead nurse, then that information manager agreement is nullified. And there have been some privacy incidents that have been reported about through the Commissioner's Office that have been investigated, where vendor made an error, but because the custodian, the healthcare provider, had not properly executed the information manager agreement, then it was the custodian that was held responsible for that error because they had not properly engaged an information manager agreement with the vendor. Oftentimes, our custodians have changed over the years, so it may have been signed by Dr. Brown 2 years ago, but Dr. Brown doesn't work for you anymore. So make sure that that information manager agreement has been updated and signed by the right people. Make sure that you've got appropriate termination clauses in place. So if the vendor changes or the healthcare practice changes, what are the appropriate exit agreements for termination, and how are you going to have continued access to patients' records? So make sure that you've got those termination and liability clauses updated. Make sure that there's no data left behind. If you're changing vendors, if you're changing EMR systems, make sure that you have care and control of the patient's information for the entire retention period. So how are you going to ensure that you've got the right people with the right access, both in your clinic and in your vendors' access to your systems? You're going to review the audit logs. So if you haven't done this lately, maybe some of you haven't done it at all, make sure that you review the audit logs of both your EMR systems, your software systems, and your computer network systems. That way you're going to be able to identify to make sure that the right people are accessing your systems, and then document that you've done this. In your policies and procedures, you should have an audit log monthly task list. So you should be reviewing your audit logs on a regular basis, and there should be a policy procedure already in place to help you to do that. If you don't have a policy and procedure about reviewing your audit logs, let me know in the chat and I'll send you a link so that you can download that procedure to help you with that. So talk with your computer network vendors about your policies and procedures. Grab those policies and procedures that you currently have in your practice. Review it with your vendors and make sure that they're current. You know, I don't speak fluent geek. I appreciate those technology folks that do, because they can help me with the terminology and make sure that I'm saying things properly in my policies and procedures. So share those specific documents with them because they're there to help you. And I'm sure the gentleman that we've got online from trying us today will say that they want to hear from more frequently from their clients to be able to get some good proactive systems in place to prevent both privacy and security incidents. If you are changing your vendors, if you've outgrown your current vendor or your vendor has changed its services, then in your PIA amendment, you're going to address what has changed, what is new, and what the termination steps have been. And again, make sure that no data is left behind. You're going to, in your PIA amendment, spend a lot of time about your new information technology vendor because it's a new addition to your privacy impact assessment. So you're going to have that new vendor review what the previous vendor had done in your policies and procedures and see what the new solution is. Make sure your policies and procedures are updated. Make sure that your new vendor is up to date with privacy breach management and how you're going to collaborate to respond to a privacy and security incident if it's computer related. Make sure that you have updated your inventories and your security risk assessments. So if you're changing information vendors, these are some key steps that you want to include in your privacy impact assessment amendment. Now, remember that your PIA should address personally identifying information in all its places. So you might have an electronic medical record, a health for your health information. You might have another system for your employee information. Maybe you've got accounts receivable, payables, payrolls. You've got business information, your policies and procedures. Where is that being kept? Where are your backups of your websites being kept? Who has access to that? Are you doing online booking? Do you have other ways to engage with your clients? Do you have a mailing list for emails to keep your clients engaged that is separate from your EMR list? How is that being managed? If you're using internet system, a voice over internet protocol for your telephone, how is that being managed and maintained so that right people have access to your telephone system? So your privacy impact assessment should address all of the places of your identifying information. And of course, you're going to address where there are any changes. Now, if there are no changes, include that in your amendment too. So I call this, yes, we have no bananas. We looked for bananas, we don't have bananas. I'm writing in my PIA amendment that we don't have bananas and that we did look for them. So the same thing applies about asking good questions. Do we collect personal information on our website? No, we don't. So you just add that to your PIA amendment. It's better to say that, yes, we have no bananas or no information on our website, rather than leaving it unspoken and the commissioner would review that information and say, I wonder if they thought about that. So yes, we have no bananas. Another area in your PIA amendment is to address the backup of your critical data. What has changed since the last time you submitted your PIA? What has stayed the same? And what have you done lately to restore your data to ensure that you have a current encryption key, that you know how to replicate that information? So whether it's a desktop exercise or it is a real life restoration of the data, it's something that you should be doing on a regular basis and recording that you've done it, so that you know that if you have a serious breach, if you've got ransomware or other security incidents, that you can restore the backup of your data. And remember, this is the backup of all of your critical data, not just your health data. The third step in doing your PIA amendment is to make sure that you are reviewing your collection, use, disclosure, and access policies and procedures. So in the resources that we've shared with you for this workshop, I've given you a checklist of all of the policies and procedures that you should have in your policy and procedure manual, so that you can cross-reference it and see if you've got any gaps. In that checklist, we've also got a column in there to say when was it created, and then you can update about when was it reviewed and updated. So again, in the chat, I'd just like to hear from you about your policies and procedures. When did you last review your policies and procedures? Enter number 1 if you've done it recently. Enter number 2 if it was been done more than 2 years ago. Number 3 if you don't know where your manual is. Or number 4, you don't know about your policy and procedure sets at all. So let me know where you are with your policies and procedures. Okay, so it's great that you know where your policies and procedures are, and then you'll be able to easily review those policies and procedures and update them as necessary. And remember, when you're reviewing your policies and procedures, to update the date on the policies and procedures when you reviewed them last. That's an important step. Okay, number 4 for doing your PIA amendment is to review your safeguards annually. So you are required to review your privacy impact assessment, your p-ORA documents, your threat risk assessments on a regular basis. Annually is recommended. Now, in your policy and procedure set, you should have some documents that are called something like privacy and security risk mitigation. That's a requirement when you did your initial privacy impact assessment. So go back to it now and then review it and update it based on any changes and your administrative, technical, or physical safeguards. Again, go back and review your audit logs. If you haven't run your audit log reports recently, now's a good time to be able to do that, and document that you have done that. Number 5 is reviewing your permissions for Alberta Netcare Portal if you're using Netcare, but it's also a good reminder about how are you authorizing users access to all of your health information, whether you're using a computer network, your EMR system, other practice management software, or other online apps. Review the steps about authorizing people to have the right appropriate access. So there should be a written policy and procedure about who's going to review that, who's going to authorize those access permissions. Update your oaths of confidentiality and make sure that your employees have signed the oath of confidentiality recently, often recommended to do that annually, and that you've kept those signed oaths of confidentiality in the personnel files. There should be a unique username and password to access the computer network and the EMR. So just having a role-based access to your computer network system or to your EMR systems is just simply not good enough anymore. You really must have a unique username and password, and that password needs to change on a regular basis. You need to have authorized users of Alberta Netcare Portal, so make sure that when you have people leaving your practice that you've updated with Netcare to say, Dr. Brown has now left and you want to have that Netcare access removed for Dr. Brown for your clinic. So that's a really important step to be able to do. Now, some clinics can do a certain amount of their own onboarding for and termination for Alberta Netcare Portal, and some have to get Netcare to do that for you. It depends often on the size of the clinic and the current state of the progression of Alberta Netcare Portal, because as we know, they're on a rolling out basis about providing access to Alberta Netcare. Review your training policies. So again, you should have training policies in your original privacy impact assessment. What have you done lately? You said you were going to do privacy awareness training, cybersecurity awareness training for all of your staff when you did your PIA. When was the last time it was done? And that's what you're going to include in your amendment. So you're going to say, we have these responsibilities for training and we're up to date. All of our new staff get a privacy awareness training, and there is a review or refresh on an annual basis, and we talk about it in our staff meetings on a regular basis. So your privacy officer is in charge of making sure that the training gets done and documented. When you do your PIA amendment, you're going to review all of those good things that you're doing about your training, and this is the time for you to shine and tell your business and the Commissioner's office that you've updated your training and everybody is up to date and current. Now, that's another just general point, is that you want to do your PIA amendment because it means that you're reviewing things and keeping things current, but it's also a way to be able to shine within your organization to let everybody else know about all the good work that you've been doing about this. So think of it as a way to do a summary for your executive reports or your annual reports, and make sure that you can glow a little bit about all the good things that you're doing to protect patients' information and continue care and treatment. Your access and correction requests. So if you are doing or joining Alberta Netcare for the first time, there are some changes in Alberta Netcare practices that you need to ensure are in your policies and procedures as well. Now, Netcare is rolling out additional permissions and things that you can do within Netcare, so that you can access the information in Netcare in a way that's different than what we were able to do 5 years ago. So make sure that you've updated your policies and procedures so that your staff know how you can generate a correction in Alberta Netcare Portal. So if a patient comes to you and says, this information that you've got for me that is also on Alberta Netcare Portal is wrong, I want to have it corrected, then your staff does have a role to help that patient ensure that the information gets corrected. So in your policies and procedures, you need to have those steps that you need to do to implement that for Alberta Netcare Portal. Now, again, depending on the size of your clinic and where you are geographically in the province, somebody in Southern Alberta will have different abilities than somebody in Northern Alberta about how they can make these changes to Alberta Netcare Portal. So be specific to your organization and make sure that your policies and procedures are updated. And this is where you highlight to the Commissioner's office that you've reviewed those policies and procedures and have updated that. So I hope you're following along on the PIA checklist, because we're on step number 8 about masking. So in your current Alberta Netcare Portal access, there are ways that you can mask a patient's record. You may also have a way to be able to mask or to restrict access to a patient's record in your EMR systems. So this is where you make sure that your policies and procedures and your training are up to date with your staff and your system to make sure that it is current and meets today's requirements regarding masking and expressed wishes. In 2018, there were significant amendments to the Health Information Act about mandatory reporting about privacy breaches. So now you need to make sure in your PIA amendment that your policies and procedures have been updated, that you've trained your staff on how to do the new mandatory privacy breach reporting, that you've got the forms in place, and that you know how to submit the information to the Commissioner's office when it's required to do that. So if you don't have your updated policies and procedures regarding privacy breaches, either let me know in the chat or send me an email after, and I'll send you a link to help you update your policies and procedures. So you need to, as a clinic, know what these updated policies and procedures are, but so do your vendors. So during your PIA amendment, reach out to your vendors and make sure that they've updated their policies and procedures and that you know who to contact in the event of a privacy or security incident. Whether or not it was an issue within the clinic or an issue with the vendor, you need to work collaboratively to be able to respond to those privacy and security incidents. So make sure that your contact information and your policies and procedures are up to date. I also highly recommend that you do some desktop scenarios. So we've got lots of examples about different types of privacy breaches that happen on a regular basis. You might have an employee who is snooping. You might have a fax that should have gone to one place and went somewhere entirely different. You may have sent an email to a patient and it sent it to the wrong person. We've got lots of examples about privacy breaches that happen on a regular basis. Use that as a desktop exercise to go through your privacy and security incident response plan. Does everybody know what the plan is? Have they read it? Do they know what their roles are? And depending on the different scenarios, you will have different types of investigations. So actually work with your vendors to say that we want to implement a desktop training scenario. Can you assign somebody to work with us to make sure that we've got a good system in place? So these are things that you want to include in your PIA amendment. It's what have you done lately that you want to include in that PIA amendment. So the 10th step, the last step in reviewing your PIA amendment, is to actually do the work. You need to update your policies and procedures. You need to update your PIA amendment and discuss it with your custodians and get your internal review. Then you're going to do a cover letter to the Commissioner's office. And you might need to share that cover letter to the executive director of a primary care network if you are a member of a primary care network. That's part of your obligations about being a member with the PCN, is to keep them up to date with your PIA status. Then you're going to submit your PIA amendment to the Office of the Information and Privacy Commissioner. So in the follow-up training that I'm going to send to you today, I've got template letters about the cover letters to the Commissioner's office and the cover letter for Alberta Netcare Portal that I'm going to share with you. Now, you can now send the PIA amendments to the Commissioner's office by email. So sign the letters, PDF the documents, PDF all the different attachments, and now you can send it by email to the Commissioner's office. You can still send it by snail mail if that's the way that you prefer to do it, but they do now allow accepting this information by email, which I am very grateful for because it saved a forest of trees. So take a look in the follow-up emails that we're going to send to you this afternoon after our workshop, and there's some additional templates to help you with that. So now is the time to take a look at the PIA amendment checklist that you have in front of you. What are your questions? How can I help you with your PIA amendment? Are you clear about what your next steps are? Go through your PIA amendment checklist and identify those things that you've got handled and those things that are outstanding. Who do you need to contact? Do you need to contact your computer vendor, your EMR vendor, your outsourced transcription or billing services? Do you need to set up a meeting with your custodians or your staff to review those policies and procedures? Do you need to get the report about what training you've done recently? So I'm here today to help you with your PIA amendment plan. So you can ask me your questions today in the chat. So I'm going to stay online, and I'm going to be able to help answer your questions. And if you've got some additional questions that come up afterwards, once you've had a chance to digest this information, you can send me an email, and I'll be happy to have a chat with you. So today, in an hour, we have talked about a privacy impact assessment amendment, what that process looks like. And I hope we've identified some scenarios that resonate with you. Whether or not you need to do a brand new PIA amendment for a project, or just for an amendment for something like Alberta Netcare Portal. Now, in your chat today, I would love to hear some more from you. What are your steps? You've invested time today to join us for this workshop. What are you going to do this week as a result of what you learned today? Enter it into the chat. So this is the accountability piece. What are you going to do that is part of what you've learned today? What has been of value to you? Maybe it's something you're going to start doing. Maybe it's something you're going to stop doing. Or maybe it's something that you're going to keep doing. What will you do today based on what you've learned? And I'm going to pause for a sip of water while you tell me what you've learned today. In the workshop today, I've provided you with some tools, the PIA amendment checklist, and I want to be able to help you, Susan, about some of the other things that you've shared with us. So we have some templates that are available regarding remote working and virtual care. So we've got policy and procedure templates about common scenarios about doing remote working and virtual care. There are some scenarios specifically about Zoom, and some generic scenarios for other healthcare platforms that you may want to use for your telehealth solution. So, you know, I don't promote any particular one telehealth solution. There are many to choose from. So you can take a look at these policies and procedure templates to help you with that. And there are some templates and tips that you can download right away. There's the practice management success tip for remote workers. You can download that and get access to some scenarios and some policies and procedures to help you with that. If you find that you are using a telehealth solution and you need to do a new PIA project, we've got some templates to help you with that as well. So you can download the checklist, or you can take a look at the course, which includes all sorts of templates to help you with that PIA submission. So if you've got a previous PIA from a couple of years ago and now you're doing a telehealth solution, you probably need to do both an amendment and a new project. Do them as two separate steps. You'll be able to leverage and use information from one to the other to make it easier, but submit them separately to the Commissioner's office. You'll get a faster response from the Commissioner's office, and I think that you'll find it's just simply a lot easier to do. So you could submit both the amendment and the new PIA project separately at separate times, or you can do them together. That's entirely your choice. Now, if you need some assistance with updating your policies and procedures, if there's just a couple of things that need to be updated, take a look at the checklist that we've given you about your policy and procedure inventory list. And if there are just a couple of things that you need to update, that's great. We've got some templates for the privacy breach templates, policies and procedures that you can download and make use in your clinic. And if you need something more comprehensive, then you can take a look at the policy and procedure templates that we have available online. So we've got templates for medical offices, chiropractic, dental, registered nurses, and nurse practitioner practices in Alberta, so that you can access that and get some advantage to that. If you need some more help with doing your privacy impact assessment, we do have 3 options to help you with your PIAs: the do-it-yourself, done for you, and done with you solutions. So you can take a look on our website if you've got some more questions about that. I want to thank everybody for joining us for the PIA Amendment Workshop today, and encourage you to sign up for our membership. So Practice Management Success membership, it is available to you. I'd like to invite you to download and have access to the membership for 30 days complimentary when you use the coupon code. So you can use the coupon code HP76XL P4ND here on the screen, and then you'll get access to 30 days to complimentary membership to Practice Management Success. And I can continue to help you and coach you about your PIA amendment process as part of that membership. So Practice Management Success provides you with easy access to webinars, articles, templates, and interviews with guest experts that help you when you need it to grow, to start, grow, or improve your practice. I want to thank Trinus for sponsoring the webinar and the workshop today, and to remind you that Trinus is the home of your stress-free IT in Alberta. I'd love to hear from the folks from Trinus about what you've learned today and how we can help you with your PIA amendments. Until next time, I'm honored that you shared the time with me so I can share my obsession with privacy and confidentiality with you. I'm here to answer your questions and to help you plan your privacy impact assessment. So let me know in the chat or by email if I can help you with your PIA amendment. Thank you for joining me today, and I hope that you have a good rest of your week. Thank you, everyone.